A developing story: the FBI has arrested an immigrant from Afghanistan on suspicion of planning an election day terror attack in the U.S. Nicole Skenga has more on that alleged plot.
The FBI says an election day attack targeting large crowds in the U.S. has now been thwarted. Agents arrested Nasir Ahmad Tuwaidi Monday after officials say the 27-year-old took steps to purchase AK-47 rifles and ammunition, going so far as to sell off his family's home to raise money. Federal prosecutors say an FBI search of the suspect's phone revealed ISIS propaganda, including these images depicting a suicide vest and the 9/11 attacks, plus a history of Google searches like how to access Washington, D.C. cameras and which U.S. state does not require a license to get a firearm. Investigators say the defendant swapped messages in two pro-ISIS groups on the Telegram app and funneled money to the foreign terrorist group online. According to court documents, the suspect first entered the U.S. in September 2021 on a special immigrant visa. The U.S. offers special immigrant visas to individuals who worked with U.S. forces as a translator or interpreter in Afghanistan. The complaint also accuses Tuwaidi of working with a juvenile co-conspirator, adding that he told investigators both planned to die on Election Day. We've asked the defendant attorney for comment.
Global warming combined with the silting of the Paraiba River has contributed to the erosion of Atafona's coast and caused the destruction of 500 houses. Now, at the mouth of the mighty Amazon River, a fragile ecosystem is threatened with the loss of biodiversity, as the river has lost strength in the region's most severe drought on record, letting salt water from the ocean advance upstream. More about it in our next report.
Sonia Ferreira has come to see what's left of her home in Atafona, Brazil, where a rising Atlantic Ocean is eating away at the coastline and taking beachfront properties with it. The 80-year-old retiree says it's taken years to return here because remembering having to leave is still painful.
It makes me very sad seeing this. I've avoided coming because memories come back in a sad way.
Atafona is just one of Brazil's coastal communities that has seen rapid coastal erosion caused by climate change. Some 500 houses have been destroyed in the area, along with the collapse of a 4-story building. In the last 30 years, the sea level has risen 5 inches in the region around Atafona. That's according to the United Nations report, Surging Seas in a Warming World. Here's marine geographer Eduardo Bulhos.
The report recently released by the UN about the coastal cities under direct impact of sea level rise projects a scenario associated with coastal erosion and marine floods. Areas such as Atafona, which suffer from chronic and extreme coastal erosion, are forecasted to lose around 150 lineal meters of coastal areas in 28 years.
One of the most popular seaside resorts on the northeast shoulder of Brazil is shrinking too. The local government is bringing in sand from elsewhere in an expensive effort to replace what has been lost to the ocean. As for the destroyed homes, Bulhos said there's no turning back. Sea levels are rising faster than ever, according to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, with a rate more than doubling in the past 10 years.
Japan recorded its highest number of bankruptcies in a decade during the 6 months leading up to September, with 4,990 companies going under. That's an 18.6% increase from the previous year. The rise reflects the growing pressures from escalating costs, particularly affecting small businesses. According to a report by Teikoku Data Bank, a record 472 firms cited inflation as a primary reason for bankruptcy. Sectors such as construction, manufacturing, and retail were particularly hard hit, facing a combination of rising operational costs and labor shortages. A record 163 firms indicated that difficulties in finding qualified workers contributed to their financial struggles. Looking forward, companies face additional risks from rising debt, servicing costs, due to interest rate hikes by the Bank of Japan in March and July. Several major banks have already announced increases in lending rates for short-term loans, potentially compounding the financial strain on struggling businesses. As the economic landscape continues to shift, many firms remain uncertain about their future amidst these challenges.
Turkish Airlines pilot has died mid-flight while flying from Seattle to Istanbul on Tuesday evening. 59-year-old pilot İlçehin Pehlivan fainted during the 12-hour flight, forcing co-pilots to divert from New York's JFK airport. A plane tracking map showed that the aircraft took off from Seattle and flew over Canada before turning around over Baffin Island. The FAA confirmed that the flight landed safely at JFK at around 6 a.m. local time on Wednesday. Pehlivan had worked for the airline since 2007 and had passed a medical examination in March. A spokesperson for Turkish Airlines said the pilot of our Airbus 350, flight TK204 from Seattle to Istanbul, collapsed during the flight. After an unsuccessful attempt to give first aid, the flight crew of another pilot and a co-pilot decided to make an emergency landing, but he died before landing.
Well, there have been quite a few of them, and there will be more. This will happen from time to time. It's happened quite often in the past, but when you consider the millions of flights that take place around the world every year, the frequency is incredibly low. The other important thing to remember is that although this has happened quite a few times, it's never resulted in the loss of an aircraft or anybody on board being hurt. Because, I mean, that's why airlines have a cockpit with two pilots in it. If one of them, gets anything from an illness, an illness which strikes suddenly like a heart attack or something agonizing like food poisoning, the other pilot is completely capable of handling the aircraft on his or her own. So from halfway up Greenland, they turned hard right and flew all the way to New York, where, of course, in New York they'll have all the emergency services that you can possibly apply. But it would take a long time, and the pilot, in this case, the captain, did not survive.
This was supposed to be a quick round trip from Santa Monica to Catalina, back here to Santa Monica, but that flight never made it back to this airport, instead crashing about a mile west of the airport there on Catalina Island, killing all 5 people on board. We can take you to the video this afternoon and show you this from FlightAware. It shows the plane's first flight of the day. It originally departed from the Santa Monica airport yesterday evening around 6 p.m. and arrived at the airport on Catalina Island in Avalon. About 20 minutes later, the twin-engine plane stayed on Catalina Island for about an hour and a half, but shortly after taking off to head back to Santa Monica, that's when an emergency took place on board. Around 8:08 p.m., a 911 SOS alert was sent from a cell phone belonging to one of the passengers, signaling an emergency and informing the police that a crash occurred. That location was tracked by GPS coordinates, prompting a quick response from first responders and multiple search and rescue teams. This now is video from the Catalina Island Conservancy's Instagram page, where you can see what it looks like from above approaching Catalina Island. Rescue teams found the wreckage in a steep, rugged area on Catalina Island there. Tragically, all 5 adults on board were pronounced dead at the scene. Officials are now working to secure that crash site. The plane is registered to the founder of Santa Monica Aviation. That's a company that shut down in 2018, but provided flight training services here at this airport. We spoke to aviation expert and former KTLA 5 News helicopter pilot Tim Lin. He says while the NTSB is investigating the exact cause, there are several factors that make the conditions difficult at Catalina Island Airport specifically.
Departing the airport is also pretty tricky too. As you depart out, you get a bit of a downdraft at the end of the runway. Also, late in the evening, you do get a lot of moisture over there with cloud cover and fog coming up the back side or the west side of the island. The airport does have an arch in the middle of the runway. So as you're coming down the runway, there's an optical illusion that makes it look like you're running out of runway. And they've had pilots attempt to pull up a little too early and without airspeed and stall aircrafts.
And so the Catalina airport officially closes at 5 p.m. and typically prohibits nighttime operations. However, it's still unclear whether that pilot got special permits to operate at that time. Of course, all of that is now under investigation. Meanwhile, the identities of those 5 people on board have not yet been released. That's the latest for now. Live here in Santa Monica this afternoon, I'm Omar Lewis. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Fresh war of words has broken out between China and the Philippines over the disputed South China Sea.
The Philippines has accused China's Coast Guard of firing water cannons at government ships taking supplies to fishermen at a disputed shoal in the South China Sea. Beijing, on the other hand, has dismissed these claims, saying it took controlled measures after Filipino boats intruded in its waters. The incident is in the two countries' latest run-in regarding the Scarborough Shoal, a fishing ground within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone that China claims as its own territory.
Scarborough Shoal, known as Huangqian Island in China, is rich in marine biodiversity. It has been a focal point of territorial disputes primarily between China and the Philippines. Both countries have been claiming sovereignty over it, although it falls under the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The shoal is located about 222 kilometers west of the Philippine island of Luzon.
The South China Sea has seen increasingly alarming confrontations between Chinese and Filipino Coast Guard ships and accompanying vessels since last year. There have been at least 12 incidents of confrontations between China and the Philippines in the past 12 months.
In June, the Philippines accused China of launching a brutal assault with bladed weapons during a South China Sea clash. It released a video showing Chinese Coast Guard officers brandishing an axe and other bladed or pointed tools at the Filipino soldiers and slashing their rubber boat.
In August, Chinese and Philippine vessels collided during a confrontation near a disputed shoal in the South China Sea. Both the countries blamed each other for attempting to use Sabina Shoal as a semi-permanent floating platform to further their respective operations.
Borrow Javier Blas' term in his recent piece, is the potential mother of all oil supply disruptions. Because we're not only talking about, Israel striking energy infrastructure inside of Iran. Once Israel does it, it opens up, it gives the green light to Zelensky to do it to Russia. And then the retaliation coming from, Iran into the other side of the Gulf or Russia into it just opens up a can of worms that we haven't seen since the 70s.
But Jeff, the market is, largely shrugging it off. So what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's to the broader point that the market in oil commodities more broadly has been unwilling to hold a position on anything, whether if it is, look through the current, uncertainty around China to see for the stimulus as it's going to improve. And I think it goes to that short-term, near-term myopic approach of trading oil. Where do we see the positioning in oil? It's in the options, which is part of the reasons why we see big moves like yesterday, down 3, up 3, that kind of moves, because you do have positioning in the options because it's the easier way to hold the position. But overall, open interest in oil, it's at a 1-year low. The market is not long, it's not short. Positioning is really weak.
Okay, but so by your calculations, first of all, what's the risk of a significant supply disruption? And I mean, could oil just go to $100 all of a sudden?
It's never been this high in our lifetimes. Well, I wasn't around in the 70s to, trading oil at that point in time, but in the time I've been doing this for 3 decades, I've never seen it this high. And I think, one of the differences, we have more transparency of it, and we can find out when it's going to happen and know what the infrastructure that could be hit here. And by the way, it's more likely to be refineries than it is to be, upstream oil assets. But I think the key point here is, it's never been this high of a probability. And we're talking low inventories.
So you think it's never been, the probability of a significant supply disruption has never been so high in the last 40 years?
It's probably in that 30% plus range, if not higher. And we look at the complacency of the market, both from the disinflation narrative. We look at positioning in oil, but let's take the war out of the picture. The underlying demand dynamics in oil are very supportive right now. You have, let's start with the U.S. You just had rate cuts on top of, a gangbuster jobs report. The dock workers just got huge pay raises, so that's U.S. You have liquidity going up. Let's turn to China, a stimulus package, liquidity going up there, even a growth impulse coming out of Europe. You put the three together, you have global liquidity turning up, growth impulse turning up. That's the ideal time to buy commodities.
Right, but so are you telling me that oil should be at $100? I mean, if you're saying there's a 30% chance of a severe supply disruption, these, the market just doesn't make sense.
Take the supply disruption out. The market should be trading in that $80+ range. So, I think you put that supply disruption on top of that. How do you handicap that? We should be sitting, at least $10 higher than where we are right now.
So should OPEC Plus actually delay their production increase that they're expected to do in December?
Well, if we look at overall demand, it's improving. That the market is in a deficit. That's the part that the forward curve is backwardated. There's this belief of this oil supply glut, but the evidence of it, I think, is not that substantial. And I think the bottom line is, the overall demand is above supply. There is room for them to bring on that production.
Even next year?
And we don't know. When we look out over next year, the forecast of that surplus keeps coming down. The EIA put one out yesterday of 200,000 barrels per day. That's getting close to zero. But how do we know what's going to happen to Saudi Arabia? Are they going to replace Iranian production in 3 weeks' time? We don't know those things. And so I think taking a strong view, we're in a surplus because fears around Chinese growth when they just, hit the stimulus button, and the onshore people believe it more than the offshore people. You look at production in the U.S., it disappointed yesterday. It came back down. So that growth is not materializing. And then we look at the spare capacity in places like Saudi Arabia. It could be swapped out for Iranian production in 3 weeks' time. So why is this bearish impetus in the market is beyond me.
But so, Jeff, when I hear you speak, there's nothing really that the market is getting right about this, right? Not the oversupply next year, not what's happening now, not the pricing next 3 months.
I think what's going on is it's too hard to hold the position, and they don't want to hold it. Up, down, $3 a day, that type of volatility. It's easier for me to sit here and talk to you about it than to actually somebody trying to hold the position.
Right. But, so when does that change? Again, if we talk about a war premium, what needs to happen for that to be
I think that the market's in that show me mode. They actually want to see it. They're not going to price it in until they actually see it, which unfortunately will be too late. And I think that it's the same thing in some of the other markets like, copper and the rest of them. They're in that show me. They're unwilling to hold a position until they see the fundamentals. They got to see it actually happen before they put it on. It's that momentum, the momentum type strategy. So it's not there right now. Instead, it's this as opposed to that.
עכשיו אתם ראיתם את ההתקפות שהאיראנים תקפו אותנו לפני זמן קצר. ההתקפות האלה היו אגרסיביות, אבל ההתקפות האלה נכשלו כי הם לא היו התקפות מדויקות. חיל האוויר לא נפגע, כל המסלולים פועלים, הרציפות נשמרת, אף מטוס לא נפגע ואף חייל לא נפגע ואף אזרח לא נפגע. דיוק בנקודות השונות הוא מאוד מאוד ממוקד. היכולת לתקוף היא יכולת מאוד חזקה, וכמו שעשינו עד עכשיו במלחמה בכל הגזרות האחרות, מי שתוקף אותנו ייפגע וישלם מחיר. התקיפה שלנו תהיה קטלנית, מדויקת ובעיקר מפתיעה. הם לא יבינו מה קרה ואיך קרה, הם יראו את התוצאות.
Well, new comments have emerged, reportedly said by U.S. President Biden, slamming Prime Minister Netanyahu as a leader and as a person in general. Now, in studio with me is ILTV's Ariella Lahiani. So, Ariella, what can you tell us about this situation, this book that was just released by Bob Woodward?
So it's no secret that the relationship between Biden and Netanyahu has been fairly rocky since the beginning of the war. Biden has publicly and on multiple occasions denounced the way Netanyahu has been handling this war. But now author Bob Woodward has released a book in which he's revealed some of the comments Biden has made behind closed doors. I'll refrain from using the same profanities he's used, but he's called Netanyahu a liar, a bad guy, and other comments, which, as I said,
other expletives.
Exactly,
Yes.
that I won't say because it's too explicit for our viewers. But it's really sad to see this. You know, America's Israel's strongest ally, and to see the relationship between the two leaders deteriorate in such a manner is upsetting and really worrying. The two leaders are meant to hold a call today to discuss Israel's response to Iran. Of course, the US will push for Israel to keep it as tamed as possible. But we'll have to see how that goes. It's unknown as of now.
Well, let's hope that that relationship can be repaired. It's lasted a very long time. I expect it to continue, but never good to hear tension between two allies. Thank you, Ariella.
This is a message to the people of Lebanon. Do you remember when your country was called the Pearl of the Middle East? I do. So what happened to Lebanon? A gang of tyrants and terrorists destroyed it. That's what happened. Lebanon was once known for its tolerance, for its beauty. Today, it's a place of chaos, a place of war. Israel withdrew from Lebanon 25 years ago, but the country that actually conquered Lebanon is not Israel, it's Iran. Iran, which finances and arms Hezbollah to serve Iran's interests at Lebanon's expense. Hezbollah has turned Lebanon into a stockpile of ammunition and weapons and a forward Iranian military base. Just one day after the October 7th massacre a year ago, Hezbollah joined the war against Israel. It launched an unprovoked attack on our cities and on our citizens. It has since fired over 8,000 missiles at Israel, killing civilians without distinctions, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze. Israel has decided to put an end to this. We've decided to do whatever is necessary to return our people safely to their homes. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel also has a right to win, and Israel will win. We've degraded Hezbollah's capabilities. We took out thousands of terrorists, including Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement. Today, Hezbollah is weaker than it's been for many, many years. Now you, the Lebanese people, you stand at a significant crossroads. It is your choice. You can now take back your country. You can return it to a path of peace and prosperity. If you don't, Hezbollah will continue to try to fight Israel from densely populated areas at your expense. It doesn't care if Lebanon is dragged into a wider war. Christians, Druze, Muslims, Sunnis, and Shiites, all of you are suffering because of Hezbollah's futile war against Israel. Today I ask every mother and every father in Lebanon a simple question. Is it worth it? Because it doesn't have to be that way. I know you want a better future for your children. So I'm speaking to all of you today. There is a better way for your children, for your cities, for your villages, for your country. You deserve to restore Lebanon to its days of tranquility. You deserve a Lebanon that is different. One country, one flag, one people. Don't let these terrorists destroy your future any more than they've already done. Stand up and take your country back. You have an opportunity that hasn't existed in decades. An opportunity to take care of the future of your children and grandchildren. You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. It doesn't have to be that way. Each of you can take a step for your future, even a small step. You can make a difference. I say to you, the people of Lebanon, free your country from Hezbollah so that this war can end. Free your country from Hezbollah so that your country could prosper again, so that future generations of Lebanese and Israeli children will know neither war nor bloodshed, but will finally live together in peace.
به رژیم صهیونیستی توصیه می‌کنیم که اراده جمهوری اسلامی ایران رو آزمایش نکنه. به رژیم صهیونیستی توصیه می‌کنیم که اراده جمهوری اسلامی ایران رو آزمایش نکنه. اگر هر حمله‌ای به کشور ما صورت بگیره، پاسخ ما قدرتمندانه‌تر و پرقدرت‌تر از گذشته خواهد بود. که سیاست جمهوری اسلامی ایران حمایت از مقاومت هست. این یک سیاست اصولی هست که قبلا بوده، الان هم هست و در آینده هم خواهد بود و به هیچ وجه ما از این سیاست عدول نخواهیم کرد. رایزنی‌های اگر صورت می‌گیره برای توقف جنایات هست، برای محکوم کردن رژیم صهیونیستی است و برای اینکه به هر حال این تلاشی که رژیم صهیونیستی برای گسترش جنگ به کل منطقه داره
برای هر عملی یک عکس‌العملی خواهد بود از سوی ایران به صورت متناسب و مشابه.
لكل فعل ستكون ردة فعل من قبل إيران بشكل مماثل ومتناسب
وحتى قوي‌تر
بل وأقوى.
سفر بنده به بیروت و دمشق یک پیام بیشتر نداره و اون اینکه جمهوری اسلامی ایران در هر شرایطی در کنار مقاومت بوده، هست و خواهد بود.